Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be tackling, kind of strange topic.
Oh, yeah.
This idea of gateway foods. Could what we eat early on actually set us up for, cravings and unhealthy habits later on in life? So we're diving deep today into an article called Gateway Foods by Dr. Bill Wilson.
Right.
He's a family physician who's actually coined this term, gateway foods, and he's even got a whole website
Wow.
dedicated to something he calls CARB syndrome.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a pretty interesting idea, this gateway food thing. There's been this gateway drug theory floating around for years.
Right.
The idea that some substances, like alcohol or marijuana, might kind of pave the way for harder drug use has been debated a lot. But, Dr. Wilson sees some interesting parallels with food.
So he's saying that just like some people think that marijuana use could lead to using harder drugs, certain foods could lead to, like cravings for more and more processed junk.
Exactly. He believes that these foods kind of act as training wheels for our brains, getting us used to that constant hit of sugar and processed ingredients.
And the more we eat, the more we crave it.
Exactly. And that's where CARB syndrome comes in. This is Dr. Wilson's term for Carbohydrate Associated Reversible Brain syndrome.
Okay, CARB syndrome. So we're not just talking about like craving those chips, but like actual changes happening in our brains because of them.
That's what he's suggesting. He links this syndrome to like 22 different brain dysfunction symptoms, from mood swings and anxiety to trouble concentrating and even memory issues. Pretty wild, huh?
It really makes you wonder, like, are we sometimes treating the symptom and not the root cause? Like, what if someone's struggling with their weight and they're depressed, but it all goes back to what they're eating?
That's a huge point. He makes the potential for misdiagnosis. He talks about how CARB syndrome depression might be mistaken for like major depression.
Oh, that's interesting.
The difference is that CARB syndrome depression often comes with weight gain, while major depression usually involves weight loss.
That's a good distinction. So if this CARB syndrome, if this carbohydrate associated reversible brain syndrome is triggered by processed foods, why do we keep going back for more? I mean, we all know they're not exactly health foods.
Right. Is it just because they taste good?
Taste is definitely a big factor.
Yeah.
No doubt those foods are engineered to hit all the right pleasure centers on our tongues.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's also a powerful biological component at play.
Yeah.
These foods are literally addictive.
Oh, wow.
They trigger that dopamine release in our brains, that feel-good chemical.
Right.
And the more we get, the more we want. It's a vicious cycle.
So it's like a cycle of craving and reward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this isn't just a modern-day phenomenon either.
Yeah.
Dr. Wilson digs into the evolutionary perspective and how our brains are hardwired to crave sweet and starchy foods.
Right.
Back in the day, these were scarce and provided crucial energy for survival.
Oh, yeah, back when we were hunter-gatherers.
Right.
Makes sense. But now instead of like finding a rare berry bush, we're surrounded by aisles of chips and candy and cookies. Our Stone Age brains meet a 21st century food environment, and those cravings get hijacked by these processed options that are everywhere. And Dr. Wilson actually uses this story about his baby daughter, Rafaela, to illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah, this is where he talks about those Gerber finger foods his wife bought. I remember reading that and being like, wait, Gerber makes junk food for babies.
Exactly. He was pretty shocked, too. He noticed how much Rafaela loved these little baby-fied versions of processed snacks, and it got him thinking about how early these gateway foods can enter our lives.
It's kind of scary to think that something as simple as those first foods could set a kid up for, a lifetime of craving these things and even health problems down the line.
And he even points to picky eaters as a potential early sign of CARB syndrome. Those kids who only want chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. While it might seem like just a phase, he suggests it could be an early indicator of this preference for processed foods over, whole, nutritious options.
So what are we supposed to do? Like ban all processed foods and go full-on caveman?
Not necessarily. Dr. Wilson isn't advocating for extremes. He suggests we shift our focus from just counting calories to really paying attention to what our food is made of. He points to several experts who are challenging conventional dietary wisdom.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting. I love a good challenge to the status quo, so tell me more about these experts. Who does he mention?
Well, for starters, he talks about Gary Taubes, who's really taken on that whole calories in, calories out model we've been hearing forever.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him. Didn't he write Good Calories, Bad Calories?
He did. Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, I remember. That was pretty controversial.
Yeah, it definitely sparked a lot of debate. But his main point is that just focusing on calories misses the bigger picture. It's not just about eating less, but about eating the right things. The types of calories we consume matter, especially when it comes to the balance of carbs, fats, and protein.
So he's saying that a calorie isn't just a calorie.
Exactly. A calorie from a processed cookie is going to have a different effect on your body than a calorie from like a handful of almonds.
Makes sense. What other experts does Dr. Wilson bring up?
He talks about Richard Johnson, who's done a ton of research on fructose.
Fructose. Oh, yeah. Isn't that like the sugar in fruit?
Yeah, it is. It's naturally found in fruit, but it's also added to tons of processed foods and drinks these days, like high fructose corn syrup.
Right. High fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, and Johnson's research suggests that too much fructose can really wreak havoc on our metabolism. It can lead to weight gain, type 2 diabetes, even heart disease.
So even though it's natural in fruit, when we get it in these processed forms and in such high amounts, that's where it becomes a problem.
Exactly. It's all about the dose. And unfortunately, with the way a lot of processed foods are made, we're getting a massive dose of fructose without even realizing it.
It's like sugar is hiding everywhere.
It really is. And Dr. Wilson also mentions Robert Lustig in the article.
Oh, yeah. Robert Lustig. He's like a big name in the anti-sugar movement, right?
He is. He's done so much to expose how harmful added sugar can be. He really compares it to an addiction.
Yeah. I mean, we've all been there, right? You have one cookie, and then you just can't stop.
Exactly. It's like your brain wants more and more.
So we've got Taubes talking about good calories and bad calories.
Mm-hmm.
Johnson warning us about the dangers of fructose, and Lustig basically saying that sugar is addictive. So it seems like sugar is playing a major role in this whole gateway food idea.
It definitely is. But if we're trying to avoid these processed foods, what are we supposed to eat instead?
Right. Where do we even begin?
Well, Dr. Wilson seems to be a fan of the paleo approach, eating like our ancestors.
Paleo, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like lots of meat and veggies.
Pretty much. The basic idea is to focus on whole, unprocessed foods. Things like meat, fish, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds.
So it's kind of like going back to basics, ditching all the processed junk that's so prevalent these days.
Exactly. And there's a growing body of research that suggests that the paleo diet can have some pretty significant health benefits.
Yeah, I've heard about that. It's not just about weight loss either, right? People report feeling better overall.
That's what I've heard. People who switch to paleo often say they have more energy, better digestion, even improvements in their mood.
And speaking of mood, Dr. Wilson also mentions David Perlmutter in the article.
Right, David Perlmutter. He wrote that book, Green Brain.
Yeah, Grain Brain. That was a big one.
It was. And in that book, he really dives deep into the connection between what we eat and our brain health.
Oh, yeah.
He argues that a diet high in refined carbs and sugar is actually really harmful to our brains.
So all that stuff we think of as comfort food could actually be harming our brains.
It's a scary thought. And he suggests that these kinds of foods can increase the risk of things like Alzheimer's and dementia.
Wow. And didn't he also talk about gluten being bad for the brain?
He did. He believes that gluten, the protein found in wheat, barley, and rye, can trigger inflammation in the brain.
So is he saying we should all go gluten-free?
Well, he suggests going grain-free, or at least significantly reducing our intake of grains, especially those that contain gluten. It's definitely a controversial stance, but, we're learning more and more about this connection between our gut health and our brain health.
It's all connected.
It really is. Everything we put into our bodies affects us in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of all that, Dr. Wilson brings up Jimmy Moore, who's a huge proponent of the ketogenic diet.
Keto? Oh, yeah, that's the one that's like super low in carbs and high in fat, right?
Exactly. It's basically flipping the script on the way we've traditionally thought about carbs and fats.
So instead of loading up on carbs, we're supposed to be eating more fat.
Healthy fats.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Okay, so like not just like bacon and butter all day.
Well, Moore would probably say there's a place for those things in moderation, but the focus is on healthy fats, things like avocados, olive oil, nuts, fatty fish.
Gotcha. And he's saying that this can actually be good for us.
He argues that a well-planned keto diet can lead to weight loss, improve blood sugar control, and even reduce the risk of some chronic diseases.
It's amazing how much our understanding of nutrition has changed over the years. Even like what we considered healthy just a few decades ago is now being questioned.
It really is. And that's why I think this deep dive is so important. We're exploring all these different perspectives and challenging these long-held beliefs about food.
We're really getting a 360-degree view of this whole gateway food concept.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that idea that knowledge is power. The more we understand about how our bodies work and how different foods affect us, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions.
And it seems like Dr. Wilson is really encouraging people to take ownership of their health. do the research and figure out what works best for them.
He is. He actually provides links to all these experts' websites and books on his own website. It's like he's saying, here's the information, now go explore and see what resonates with you.
I love that. So we've talked about these gateway foods, how they might be impacting our brains, and even explored some alternative ways of thinking about nutrition. But the big question remains, can we break free from these cravings if they're so deeply ingrained in our biology and our habits?
That's the question, isn't it? And one we'll try to answer in the final part of our deep dive.
All right, so we spent the last 2 parts talking about this concept of gateway foods and how they might actually be, kind of rewiring our brains, and how maybe there are other ways to think about nutrition and all that. But what's the bottom line? Can we actually break free from these cravings once they've got us in their grip?
I think we absolutely can. It might not be easy. We're fighting against some pretty powerful biological and, even psychological forces.
Right.
But it all starts with taking control, taking back the power,
So instead of feeling like we're helpless victims of these cravings, we can actually make different choices.
Exactly. It starts with a change in mindset. Instead of focusing on restriction and deprivation, we need to shift our thinking to nourishing our bodies with real whole foods.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Think vibrant fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats, maybe minimally processed grains if you choose to include those.
That sounds great. I mean, in theory, but, life gets busy and those processed foods are just so convenient and easy.
I hear ya. But I think the key is to start small and be patient with yourself. You don't have to overhaul your entire diet overnight.
So no need to go cold turkey.
Exactly. Just focus on making gradual changes. Maybe swap out one processed snack each day for a piece of fruit or a handful of nuts.
Okay, little changes can add up.
Exactly. And it's less overwhelming that way. And you can get creative with it. Involve the whole family. Try cooking together.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, go to a farmer's market. Maybe even start a little garden.
Make it a fun experience.
Exactly. And speaking of families, we talked about how early exposure to gateway foods can really shape kids' preferences. So what can parents do to help their kids develop healthier habits early on?
Well, I imagine setting a good example is huge. Kids are little sponges. They're always watching and learning from us.
Oh, absolutely. If they see you constantly reaching for those processed snacks, they're going to pick up on that. But if you're enjoying fruits and veggies and home-cooked meals, they're going to be way more likely to try those things too.
Right. And making mealtimes a positive experience.
Yeah.
No pressure, no forcing them to clean their plates.
Totally. It's about building a healthy relationship with food. You can even involve kids in meal planning and preparation. Let them help choose recipes, wash the vegetables, even stir the pot.
Yeah, that's a great way to get them excited about food.
It is. And you're teaching them valuable life skills at the same time. But let's be real, kids love treats, and those gateway foods are everywhere.
Right. They're hard to escape.
So it's about finding that balance. You don't have to ban treats altogether, but you can make them an occasional indulgence rather than an everyday thing.
So it's more about teaching kids to make healthy choices most of the time while still allowing for some flexibility and fun.
Exactly. And don't forget, those marketing tactics aimed at kids are super powerful. The bright colors, the cartoon characters, it's all designed to get them hooked.
It really is. It's like we almost need to teach kids how to be savvy consumers. Read those labels, make informed decisions.
I think that's a great idea. Help them understand what's actually in those processed foods and how they compare to whole natural options.
This has been such an interesting deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we're not powerless. We can actually take control of our health and our kids' health by understanding the science and making informed choices.
I couldn't agree more. Knowledge really is power. And by sharing this information with others, we can start a ripple effect and hopefully inspire some positive change.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into gateway foods. We hope you've learned something new and that you feel empowered to make healthier choices. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep nourishing your body and mind.